mid-cycle review with a 2-year budget. And Maria? You've been busy.
It's been a fun time in finance. Favorite time of year. See, I have a very short presentation for you today. Let's see. Can't see where this little thing is. Alrighty, so Mayor Atkin, members of the council, I'm Maria Oberg, I'm the finance director, and we have before you the mid-cycle budget review. Finance staff has sat down with every department in the city as well as with the city manager's office and looked at where we are in the first year of the 2-year operating budget and where we think we're going to be next year. As you know, we approved the current 2-year budget in June 2014, and of course there's always stuff that happens during the first year. So if we just look at a very brief summary of the general fund adjustments, in the 15 budget cycle we had budgeted about net revenue of about $177,000. With the changes that have happened in revenue, for instance, our building permit fees have come in a lot higher than we budgeted. We also have the property transfer tax in place, which was not part of our original 2-year budget. We are looking at coming in at projected fiscal 15 year-end results of about $2.6 million in net revenue. Look to fiscal 16, we budgeted net revenue of about $50,000, and with the changes, again, it's fees and permits from building activity and the property transfer tax. We're looking at net budgeted for the amended budget of $131,000. Here's a very quick summary of the changes we're seeing to the general fund revenues. Again, the most significant one, of course, is real property transfer tax, but also transient occupancy tax keep increasing, and that is consistent with what other cities in the Bay Area are seeing, so we're not overly optimistic here. General fund expenditure adjustments, very minor in 2015. A lot of the decreases in expenditures you see there is a shifting of budget dollars to 2016. In 2016, we have some increases related to the minimum wage ordinance, both administration and also what we're paying our part-time employees, as well as with increased permit activity, there's an increased cost for those contracts that are associated with that. Back in December, when we took the CAFR to you for approval, we promised we would bring something back about the unassigned 2014 general fund balances. They were about $12 million, and we have a council-directed policy saying that a minimum of 25% of budgeted expenditures must be held in reserve, with a goal of bringing it up to 50%, including the Economic Uncertainty Fund, and then long-term, we should come up with something to make them even bigger. In this case, since we are so close to closing out fiscal 15, our recommendation is that we fill the reserve goal up to 50%, which would leave you an available unassigned fund balance of about $1.8 million. And we have some suggestions for that. We suggest that we set aside $500,000 for the increased PBID expenditures for fiscal 16 related to Karen's prior presentation. We are also recommending that we give a one-time cash infusion to the Child Center. I know they are currently working with their consultant to come up with a financing plan, and I know Pedro from Community Services will be here in a couple of weeks to tell you the status of the Child Care Center, but for now we think a one-time funding of that would be beneficial. So that said, that leaves a little bit of extra money, so we will be over 50% in reserves, but again, in the fall of this year, 2015, when we bring the CAFR to you, we will come up with a long-term plan for you with more of a long-term, like 5-year forecast with suggestions and options for you to use these unassigned fund balances. There are...
I thought we were going to weigh in on that $700,000 tonight.
Yeah, you can if you wish.
Okay. You certainly can.
You absolutely can. My recommendation is not necessarily yours. Also wanted to bring back a summary of the unfunded liabilities. Those of you who were on council in December remember this from the CAFR discussion. This is just a status report based on our actuarial valuations of our retirement and our other post-employment benefits, the retiree medical benefits that we have. I would caution you to not get too hung up in these ginormous numbers of the unfunded liability. This is a long-term liability. It's not something that's coming due within a year. It's a long-term liability, and therefore it's not fully funded because, again, it's an investment account. The funding status, you see, anything in the 80 to 90% is actually quite good. You do not want to fully fund your unfunded liabilities on the retirement and OPEB side. The OPEB side, we're a little lower. We're still fairly good. This is a relatively new requirement, and compared to other cities, we are actually doing quite well. In addition, we have some funds set aside that are not shown in these valuation reports because they are funds that we hold in-house. So there is funds set aside in the budget to help offset some of these unfunded liabilities.
And just if I may on that note, you'll see at the bottom there, just as an example, your fire unfunded liability for the retiree health care of $1.6 million. As an example, we have set aside all of that into a side fund at this point. So that's something that when they bring the 5-year forecast back with some recommendations, that's something I would recommend that you go ahead and move that into something like a CalPERS trust fund. So then you would be 100% funded or 90-something% funded for the fire, just as an example.
That is all I had.
Maria, do you know if we're going to be subject to the healthcare Cadillac tax in a couple of years? Ian, I'm sure you know about this.
The Cadillac tax, we receive our health care from CalPERS, so we're dealing with a very large agency that doesn't have a lot of agility. It's sort of the big player in healthcare, and that is something that they'll be addressing at that level and something we can bring back information on. So we haven't made that determination whether we're going to be subject to that Cadillac tax in terms of our employees at this time.
Don't know. Okay.
We'll bring it.
Would it be possible if we could hear from Bill Reuter as a representative of the Finance Committee? These are citizens that have taken their time to go over these figures in this budget, and this community involvement is very important to us. If you could give
Bill,
us
you want to talk?
your comments.
You were kind of set up.
We had a chance, of course, to look at this at the last meeting of the Finance Advisory Committee, and on balance, I thought it looked pretty good. Nora, I share your constant and continuous concern about unfunded liabilities. I was very pleased to see that that's all taken very seriously and that the staff has got their eye on that. I'm also pleased to see that our reserve funds are in good shape, and that was helpful. The adjustments, these midterm adjustments, I thought they were reasonable based on the ebb and flow of such things as the transfer occupancy tax. So from my point of view, when I walked away from the meeting, and I think this is shared by other members of the committee, we endorse this midterm adjustment. Things look pretty good. The ship's afloat. Hope it stays that way.
Good to hear from the citizens.
Is there any public comment?
Well, I have some questions.
Okay.
This is a theoretical question. Aiming at higher and higher reserves seems great from a security point of view. We never know what major catastrophe could happen, but is there a downside to having high reserves? And what would you say that downside, or some of those downsides are?
Well, it depends again, right? But yes, there is a downside. It's a little bit like fully funding your retirement benefits, for instance. Once you've done that, you've committed those funds and they can't be used for anything else. If you fully fund your reserves, or you just divert all your money to reserves, you don't have money for capital projects or even staff salaries or any of these other programs that you would want to do. And there's a fine balance.
And if I may also on the reserve, our target percentage here is 50%, and I will be honest with you, when I first got here I thought 50%, but when you're looking at it in terms of absolute dollar terms, it's not that much money. I mean, if you had a catastrophic event, I mean, what is it, you're at just over $15 million that we've set aside. It's not in terms of order of magnitude that much money. It's a large percentage, but it's just because of the size of our budget. So I think it's right on.
Okay.
Any other questions from council?
comment.
Yeah.
I just want to point out one of the additions that is on the table this evening, and that's crossing guards for Annie Yates Elementary School. And this is something that the parents at Annie Yates, along with the principal, really want, and I'm glad to see that it's in this proposal and that the city is helping with this. Municipalities all around us have crossing guards, and Annie Yates being bound by Adeline and San Pablo, and those people being so little, it's really important that we make sure they're safe on their way to school in the morning. So I'm grateful to see this on there.
Any other comments?
My only comment on the crossing guards is I thought the sentence that said the school district would start picking up the tab in 2 years.
In 2 years.
Was a little misleading.
Well, it's part of their conditions of approal for the ECCL.
I'm thinking about their bank account.
Well, yes, we know that, but
I have a comment also around OPEB, and I think I might be in a minority position here on the council, but at one point our OPEB liability was $10 million, and at one point in time Emeryville had reduced it by 70% down to about $3 million. And then now I understand the OPEB liability has started to creep up again. It might be more like $4 or $5 million. So it seems to me that I'm not in favor of kicking the can down the road, and I've been a minority position on that as well.
You have my support on that. You know that.
And when we've had excesses and decide where to put them, more has gone into the economic uncertainty fund than I've been comfortable with relative to what's gone into OPEB. So the OPEB problem just seems to go up exponentially over time, and that if we nip it at the lower down earlier on, then the problems aren't going to grow quite as large. So I just want to let you know that this one council member wants to be as aggressive as possible about OPEB, because it's a long-term liability that just grows exponentially.
Make that 2 council members.
So let's see if this is
it's an action.
an action item here. Let's see.
I'd move, what are the adjustments that we're making? Are we accepting the staff recommendation?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything else about that. I want to note, though, that we're going to need to increase our own city staffing by one FTE to administer the new minimum wage. So we're having to spend more money about this too, as well as deal with salary adjustments of existing personnel. So I think that's one thing to note. The salary adjustments are about $80,000, and then $125,000 on an ongoing basis to administer the minimum wage. And you talked about the crossing guards.
Yes.
I think that's a nice collaboration and a good thing to do, and has a pretty low price tag on it, all things considered.
Yeah.
And so is there a motion on the resolution to adopt the mid-year
So moved.
adjustments?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Maria, for your work, and for everybody else who played a role. Ian, I'm sure.
Michelle.
I'm sorry, is that
Mayor?
7.21
There was a second
and 7.22?
resolution regarding appropriations.
Move the staff recommendation on the appropriation.
Second.
Ooh, feedback. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that also passes unanimously. That's